Hello, my name is Lisa Deaton. I am a Louisiana Nurses Political Action Committee contributor and volunteer. As a nonpartisan organization, LANPAC is conducting interviews with candidates running for our state legislature. We want to learn more about where the candidates stand on issues that are important to nurses and to the health and welfare of the citizens of our state. LANPAC solicited input from nurses across our state, and then our Board of Trustees finalized the questionnaire from the top issues submitted. These questions were provided to our candidates prior to their interview. I am delighted to welcome John Milkovich, who is running for Senate for District 38 of the state legislature. Welcome, candidate Milkovich. And now I'd like to turn it over to you so you can give us a few opening remarks before we move into the questions.
Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today. And I hope I can do as well on my part as you've done on yours. You've been beautifully prepared. You know, my older sister has been a nurse or nurse practitioner for, oh gosh, over 45 years. And of course, she got her start on the banks of the Madison River in Southwest Montana, where she would, believe it or not, she would, it was just the calling that God put in her life. She would try to put casts on turtles, birds, frogs. I mean, she was a Riverside veterinarian, and little did we know that was God showing us her lifelong calling. She went on, and she is continuing to have a very distinguished career as a nurse practitioner with specialties in wound care and cognitive health and sleep therapy, and in particular was just an outstanding practitioner in the fields of wound care and cognitive care. But this is what's important to me, and I think really to everybody. This is what I think the priorities of nurses and legislators, and really the priorities of everyone in our state and district should be, and for that matter, America. I think that nurses should be allowed to measure medical freedom. I don't think that practicing exactly the way the government says, or exactly the way the pharmaceutical industry demands, exactly the way that other healthcare providers think is always the best choice for both the practitioner and nurse practitioners, as well as the patient. I believe that we are in an era, in an age of a re-examination maybe of some teachings and principles of medicine, where we are having the courage to understand the value of conventional and pharmaceutically mediated therapies, but also to understand that there can be some great value and great therapeutic benefit from traditional holistic supplemental medicine. And I believe that it's important to understand that nurses have minds, and so do patients, and patients have freedom. And I think patients should have freedom to be able to work and receive treatment from nurses who are trying to find the best strategy, the best course for treating them and their particular disease and disease entity, and based upon the history and their genetic. And are we back on, Lisa?
We are.
Okay. And then I'll say very briefly this, that I think it's important to understand that nurses play an important role in the continuum of healthcare. They're not just placeholders. They're not just people that run and pick things up and simply follow. They have brains, they have intellect, they have compassion, they have hearts, they love their patients, they want the best for their patients. And I think everyone, of course, my sister's a nurse, so that makes me love nurses because I love my sister. But I think beyond that, who doesn't love nurses? Who hasn't been in a hospital or an ER room or in a clinic at some point and needed someone to listen to what was going on so a proper diagnosis could be made? And who hasn't at some point wanted a nurse to help apply the therapy with some love and compassion and concern for the patient. That there's a lot of healing that goes on in nurses' concern. And then, and this is, I think, more potentially an edgy issue, but it's an issue that I addressed in the legislature, and we made some historic.
We're back.
Joe, are you there? Okay, I feel more comfortable when I see your smile. But listen, I think nurses are entitled to justice and due process and fairness in their dealings with the licensing board. Am I saying that there's no role for licensing board? Absolutely not. And there are cases where there needs to be some guidance, some monitoring, maybe some discipline. But I believe that the nurses should be respected and viewed and honored as medical professionals. And they, like everyone else in America, I believe, are entitled to justice, fairness, and due process in licensure proceedings. And then finally, as I've discussed with you, Lisa, before we went on air, as a legislator, I have leaned towards allowing highly trained medical professionals to use the full scope of their talent, training, and gifting. And rather than shrinking what nurses can do and what other medical healthcare providers can do, I think they need to be allowed to do what they know how to do and what they're licensed to do. So I lean towards recognizing the full scope. And you and I both know that some of the most medically brilliant and gifted people in our state and our nation are nurses.
Okay, well, thank you for those opening comments. We'll move into the questions now. The first question has to do with healthcare disparities. We all know prior to COVID-19, we recognize that healthcare services are not always accessible on an equitable basis, not only in our state, but nationwide. COVID shined an even bigger light on that problem. Healthcare, though, is only 20% of what accounts for one's health status, and the social determinants of health are non-medical factors that influence our health outcomes. What strategies do you have to assist with reducing social determinants of health impact on the citizens of our state?
Well, and I'm going to, if you allow me to, I'm going to try to answer that on at least two levels. Number one, historically, I've had the opportunity to support through our church and through other ministries, ministries that provide, and charities and outreaches that provide healthcare to the less fortunate and people that may not have insurance or may not be able to pay $700 for a medical visit. So I believe that there's an important role in the private sectors, and I honor and value and appreciate those in medical ministry and medical charities who are out there doing the real work of providing healthcare to people that don't have the money or the insurance. And honestly, they're not just doing it in our city, our state, or our nation. They're doing it around the world. They're medical heroes. I think we need to support them monetarily and in prayers and in every way we can. And I advocate that approach be adopted by all. And we've got heroes in Shreveport. Mary Alice Roundtree, I believe is her name, among others, and Mark Ratley, people I know. I've met Mary Alice Roundtree. Mark Ratley's a friend of mine. I hope I'm getting Mary Alice's name exactly right. But just they're among Mac McCarter, my pastor, Pastor Denny Duran, so many people in our community that have reached out to help the underserved in every area, in every way. But you ask a very large question that's really hard, and I'm going to keep it brief because it is. You said, well, what about, you said that so Lisa, are we together on the same page, Lisa?
We are.
Okay, I'm just not seeing your smiling face again, which I regret. So what makes us a better society? And look, people have different views, but I'm a little bit old school, as many people know. I'm a Bible believing Christian. I think some of the fundamental pillars of our society that make a difference in the social, emotional, physical health, and on a physiological and spiritual basis. We need good education. I've been an advocate, as you know, I served in the state senate from 2016 to 2020, and I was an advocate for good education. And of course, gets a little bit political edgy. I was against Common Core. I'll admit it. I fought it. There were 4 bills filed in the 4 years I was in the state senate to get rid of Common Core. John Milkovich filed every one of them. That may endear me to some people, may make other people mad at me, but that's the fact. The other thing that we did is I addressed safety in the schools. And again, this is a difficult issue, but if we can't even speak about what's really going on in our community, there's no way we're going to change it. And one thing that I addressed, and I met some parents of children
We're back. I'm not
who
sure
had
why we're bumping in and out.
That's okay. I'm going to suggest it's probably what's going on my side. But very to the point, I met multiple parents whose children had literally been bullied into suicide. One of the worst tragedies. So I filed a number of bills demanding safe schools. One was an anti-bullying bill. The current law in Louisiana is that if someone is bullying a victim, then the victim is permitted to change schools. So we don't make the bully change schools or kick the bully out of school. We kick the victim out or make him change schools. That's crazy. I mean, that's turning things upside down. So I've been an advocate for safe schools. I've been an advocate. I filed the Safe Schools Act. I filed the Teachers Bill of Rights, all to get to the point of safe schools, even filing legislation that says that if there are violent students that are preying on other students, terrorizing, and that's happening in the parish east of here, east of the Red River. I've heard reports and verified reports from professionals and from parents. A number, if I gave you the number, it would shock you, of children that have been bullied into suicide. Guess what? Safe schools are not optional. We have an absolute right to demand them and tell principals and superintendents, get your school safe, get the bullies and predators out of the school. If you need to get law enforcement on campus, that's what we need to do. Kids deserve a safe learning environment.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm proactive on crime, and the Bible says that you bring children up in nurture and admonition. So that has 2 parts. The admonition. I believe that if children are involved in gangs and gang violence, they need to be held accountable. And you say, well, that's kind of strict. Aren't you being hard on children? No, I think what's hard is that in Shreveport, as of September 18th, we've had over 50 homicides committed in our city. And if you talk to police officers, as I have, and I have fortunate to be a friend of multiple police officers, they will tell you that there is a serious problem with juvenile crime. I spoke to one pastor who's involved in the criminal justice system, and he says that the federal estimates are that there are 2,500 gang members in Northwest Louisiana, yet Shreveport, for example, has 24 juvenile beds. We need to have the courage to take violent people off the street and put them in jail. And if they're teenagers, look, we won't give up on them, but we need to protect them from themselves, and the community deserves to be protected. And you're talking about holistic health and looking at the health of the whole community. What about people that are trapped in inner cities and through no fault of their own, they're in high crime neighborhoods? They need to be protected. And I believe it's high time that we say that the right of all law-abiding citizens to live in peace and freedom supersedes the license of violent criminals to terrorize the community. So if we need to, we will put teenagers and youths and older people in jail to protect the community. I was the only member of the Senate between 2016 to 2020 to file a bill that actually increased jail time for violent crimes. And I was, as some know, I did favor that if a 17-year-old commits a violent crime, I feel like they should be should be held wholly accountable. And at the same time, so that's the admonition. What about the nurture? I've worked in children's ministries at some level or another for a period in excess of 20 years. That means teaching Sunday school to small children. That means working our children's church in the past. But that also means not just reaching out to church kids. I've done some work in Winter Circle ministry to inner city kids that's done through our church, Shreveport Community Church. I preached at the Rutherford House. Those are kids, troubled kids that they're kids that the judge says throw them in jail, and when all but about 1 cubic centimeter of them gets inside the jail, he says, okay, I'll give them one more chance, and they get sent to the Rutherford House. Or kids that have other challenging circumstances. Well, I spent Sundays over a period of about 5 years doing ministry in the Rutherford House, and of course I preached at the Juvenile Detention Center, and I'll end all that point with quickly by saying this: kids spell love Time. So I think it's important to hold children accountable for violent crimes and punish them so they can have a reckoning, so they can have remorse, so they can gain a sense of responsibility and consequences when they're harming other people. And then at the same time, so important that adults get involved with kids. I've often said that parents with kids need to be parents to kids that don't have parents. And I've tried to do that.
Well, I'm going to move on. If you're okay, I'm going to move on to the next question because I think you've kind of touched on some of it, but there might be a
Yes. Absolutely.
The next question is relative to safety and violence, and it talks about, we know that gun violence continues to roar through our communities, in schools, houses of worship, malls, anywhere now. Do you have any strategies to address this problem in our state?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's just common sense. And I know you'd like to hear something brilliant, profound to me from me original, but it's nothing that you couldn't hear from anybody on the street anywhere in Louisiana or probably America. And that is, in our schools, we need to enforce discipline. If there are violent students that are terrorizing others, they need to be removed. They need to be held accountable. Same thing on the streets. If there are people, whether they're youthful adults, or older adults that are terrorizing the community, they need to be in jail. Our nurses I don't feel nurses feel safe at the end of a night shift walking from the hospital to the parking lot. That's outrageous. And of course, I advocate for having security, but I think also we need to say that years ago, there was a tragic murder even committed at LSU Medical Center, just a horrible thing. So I think we need security in our medical institutions, but I also think as a general rule, violent criminals need to be in jail and I feel that way. And then of course, not only do we hold violent criminals accountable, but I believe, again, as I said earlier, that we need mentoring. We need to be spending time loving kids that are going down the wrong track, because I believe this. I think a lot of those kids, if they get mentoring, if they get time with adults spent with them, or even if it's in jail and they get gospel ministry, I've done prison ministry before, some of these young people are going to come back and become leaders and help us rebuild our community. But in the meantime, we need to show them love and encouragement and support. But people that are committing violent crimes, there needs to be accountability, consequences, and they need to be in jail. That's what I believe.
Okay. The next question has to do with rapid fentanyl test strips. And these are test strips that you can use to determine if a drug has been cut or mixed with fentanyl. With important information about fentanyl, healthcare providers can take steps to reduce the community's risk of overdose and death. How would you support legislation to make, or would you support legislation to make rapid fentanyl test strips more readily available?
110% yes. It's a great question, a great answer. Yes, I am for rapid fentanyl presence detection tests. I know that's not the correct technical term, but I absolutely agree 1,000%. These fentanyl test capabilities need to be available. They need to be accessible. We need to use them to save lives. And, receiving the information at this point that fentanyl is a weapon that's being shipped across our border as really an attack on America's youth and people that are older that may be using street drugs. And of course, we're against the use of street drugs, but we killing people that are struggling with addiction. We've got to stop fentanyl, and really we need to stop it at the border. But I know that's another larger issue. But I want to thank LANPAC for coming up with that initiative. And if I'm elected, I'm all the way on board.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with faculty shortage and nursing shortage. How would you advocate for federal and state funding to support recruitment and retention of nursing faculty to reduce the nursing shortage?
You know, there is, at both the federal and the state level, there's so much money that is wasted. I know you hear that all the time. And it gets to the point where the good, valid needs aren't addressed because we're dissipating so much of our spending in the bureaucracy and programs that discourage incentive and accountability and self-determination. But the fact of the matter is, the greatest part of the nursing educational system in Louisiana is through our universities. And if that is a need, I think it needs to be addressed, because we need great nurses. And how do you get great nurses? Well, one step is that you grow up on the banks of the Madison River in southwest Montana, doing surgery and non-invasive therapies for injured frogs and birds and other animals. But another is having great instructors in our nursing schools. So to me, that is a valid focus of resources. And not all the resource investments I've seen as a former state senator are valid like that.
Okay. Our next question has to do with access to care. And you mentioned this briefly in your opening remarks, I believe, but are you supportive of actions to remove arbitrary barriers that prevent all healthcare professionals, including advanced practice nurses, from practicing to the full extent of their education, licensure, and training?
My general philosophy, it's not my general philosophy. Again, perhaps no one in this campaign has ever accused me of having an original thought. This is the way people on the street think that have common sense. Of course, we need to respect and protect and honor the special role of physicians and MDs. But many physicians will tell you that they are able to achieve great success because of the other people in the healthcare continuum that are around them. So my general philosophic position is that I think we need to support healthcare professionals operating in the full extent of their gifting, training, creativity, ability, education. That's what I believe.
Okay, thank you. The last two questions are really general questions. The first one is, what are your legislative priorities if you're reelected to the state legislature?
Well, you know, I believe that it's important. You know, this is the Bible Belt, and Louisiana has some great strengths, Lisa. You know, we're on the bottom of a lot of categories: roads, crime, and education. We're really doing bad in those areas, and not all education. There's some people in the school system that really fight for the kids: principals, superintendents, teachers, parents, students, grandparents. But I think that a strength that Louisiana has, where we're not ranking 48, 49, 50, where we do often in areas like crime and transportation infrastructure and education. One of our strengths is faith and family. And I believe, and when I was in the Senate for 4 years, and look, this didn't make everybody happy at South Louisiana, I can tell you, I think that we need to incorporate our values into our government and our education. That means concern for others. That means doing the right thing. That means let's not waste taxpayers' money. Let's be careful with taxpayers' money. Let's go ahead and name priorities. So I believe that our government and our education should reflect our faith. I did mention it a lot, but our education, some of the textbooks that our state is giving to small children. If I told you, unless I showed you the book, you wouldn't believe it. I've read the books, I've studied them. I think our education, especially for younger students, needs to reflect our values that don't always. I think it's a priority to protect, for me, it's a priority that we protect our freedoms and our constitutional rights. And that's something that I hear throughout our district. I think that we need to get rid of unnecessary, needless.
We're back.
Good. Okay, so and very quickly, I think we need to get the government off the backs of the people by way of unnecessary taxation. Every politician says that. As a state senator, and I thank God for this, I was named most fiscally conservative state senator in Louisiana. And my wife says, John, don't tell everybody that. Not everybody likes that. But I feel like this. The government shouldn't be taking money from you that it wastes. And as state senator, I was the only, in the 2016-2020 term, I was the only state senator that went to the floor of the Senate and proposed hundreds of millions of dollars of targeted specific spending cuts. You might say, oh gosh, that's terrible. You're taking things away from people. Well, not exactly. I mean, if things are wasteful, yes, I think we need to. And I think, of course, we need to foster self-reliance, obviously. But these are just a few examples. For example, our state currently subsidizes one of the richest families in Louisiana. Another point, the growth of our state central bureaucracy. When I was in the Senate, I believe the number was we had 38,000 employees in the state regulatory system, the bureaucracy. And I didn't advocate firing people that they lose their jobs and don't have a way to provide for their families. But what I did say, how about for 1 year we do a hiring freeze? So for 1 year the government doesn't grow. That would have saved millions upon millions of dollars to taxpayers. So I think we need to be careful about tax on our middle class. Who pays the taxes? It's not the huge multi-billion-dollar corporations, a lot of time, who have consultants and lobbyists and attorneys and accountants and politicians that help them get tax breaks. And it's not the people that can work but refuse. It's the people in the middle, I'm convinced, that are paying the bulk of state and federal taxes. So I think we need to get in their corner. Election integrity. I'm a firm advocate that the people should win every election. That means if Lisa gets 47 votes and Joe gets 20, Lisa won the election, and we need to know it that night. And we need to have a paper trail. It needs to be auditable. I believe we need to confront crime head on. I do think that people that are committing violent crimes need to be in jail, and I think we need to increase the sentences. I think we need to look at what's going on in the district attorney's office in Caddo Parish. I know that's very edgy to say that, but I mean, it's the truth. We got to get to the truth. We have a horrible crime problem in Shreveport. People are leaving Shreveport. Companies aren't coming to Shreveport, and that affects the quality of life of every nurse and every one of their families. I am an advocate for health freedom. I think health decisions are made best between the patient and their nurse, physician, their practitioners, and not, frankly, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I don't think health decisions should be forced on us by Washington or Tony Fauci or Bill Gates. I think individuals consulting nurses and their physicians, of course, should be able to make their own independent decisions about their health and the course that they want to take. And I think, and I said that references briefly earlier, I think we need fairness, due process, and justice in all of our licensure proceedings. The fact is, nurses have spent years in education and training and seminars and follow-up education and thousands of hours and years upon years in perfecting their education and their abilities. I think that no one should ever have their ability to make a living and practice, do what God's called them to do, and to practice the profession that they've been trained to perform based on a technicality or a politics, or because maybe they have a somewhat different perspective, treatment perspective or protocol or approach than maybe big pharma. I think we need to respect the integrity. And I think due process, fairness, and justice in licensure proceedings, that's not optional. That is an absolute non-negotiable.
Okay, I think you touched upon some of this, but you may have one or two things to add. Why should Louisiana nursing community support you as the candidate for your Senate seat 38?
Lisa, and by the way, I want to thank you, Lisa. I want to thank LANPAC. I want to thank the nurses of Louisiana. You've made many, many sacrifices. And I'm saying this to nurses around the state. You've seen some things, and including during the COVID virus and vax situation, you've seen some things, and you've asked some questions, and you felt like our voices aren't being heard, or some things are wrong, or if I speak out, I may be held accountable or put my career in jeopardy. I support freedom, responsible freedom by nurses in the exercise of treatment decisions to protect the freedom and health of the patient and to respect the professionalism and training of the healthcare provider. I think we need to get back to respecting medical freedom. Secondly, as I've said before, I believe in justice, due process, and fairness for nurses in the licensure proceedings. And I will say this, politicians, and I've fussed about this during this campaign, politicians make speeches and talk about stuff that they said that they say they're going to do. My question is, what have you done? As a state senator from 2016 to 2020, I filed more bills to support the integrity, freedom, and due process and justice and just fair proceedings for professionals, including health professionals, than any other member of the legislature during those 4 years. And that was well known. Now, the media didn't cover it, and the mainstream media didn't want to give it positive coverage, but that was a major issue that the senator for District 38, John Milkovich, by the way, if I did anything right, we'll give God all the glory, and we'll give all the credit to the people of Caddo and DeSoto parishes that helped me. But we made it a real issue that if you're a professional in this state, the contractors board, the licensing board, they need to give you a fair hearing. They need to tell you the charges against you. They need to give you due process. They need to give you, you should have a fair chance to defend yourself. And I do believe, and Lisa, I think you've alluded to it in this conversation, that nurses should be allowed to express their full training and education and learning and ability. And so many of our nurses have spent decades either learning or practicing their profession. I think we should go ahead and respect the scope of what they're able to do and protect and honor the full scope of their abilities that God has given them and which they have refined over time.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And now I'd like to give you 1 to 2 minutes for final closing remarks before we end this interview.
Well, honestly, I think I've said my major concerns about 4 or 5 times a piece. I apologize, but I just think that you probably can't find a single person in Louisiana that doesn't have not just one, but a bunch of great nurse stories. Fact of the matter is, I think people of Louisiana love nurses. We love the nursing profession. And I think all nurses are asking for is to be heard, to be respected, and to be given a fair shake in the medical system. And as far as John Milkovich is concerned, they're entitled to exactly that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and good luck to as your campaign moves on. And again, have a great rest of your day.
Lisa, thank you so much for allowing me this chance. Thank you, ma'am.